Hello. So, I have started thinking about the summer, and I am not an aquatics genius. I'm just really big into people, and I love lifeguards and all of their craziness. And working with teenagers has definitely made me rethink some things, things that I couldn't get away with, even though my boss knows that I'm crazy. Um, I've had to find creative, um, emotionally based solutions for these problems. We have some really weird things at our facility, like we have feeling circles, we have social contracts, and we have very in depth conversations trying to figure out the root of problems, not just saying that there is a problem. So, based on that information, I'm going to go over today our aquatics team social contract and how I go through that. This is going to take about 20 minutes. So, if you don't have time for all that, just pause it and come back to it. But if I'm passing this document out, I kind of want there to be some context as to how I discuss this with my team and how it's actually been very effective as a tool for having them acknowledge what the expectations are of them in a social manner. Also building relationships, building camaraderie in our team, and almost like a family atmosphere. That is one thing we get feedback on. Even if they complain about me or they complain about the facility or their hours or whatever, we get a lot of compliments from our guards in regards to the fact that they feel like it's a family, which is what I'm going for. They don't always have to like me, but I really need them to kind of like each other, or at least respect each other. So that's going to start us off into topic number one. I understand that I am part of a team and will work with my team despite my personal feelings towards them. This means that you don't have to like each other. Your shifts are only 4 hours long. You are at your own house for the other 20 hours a day with your other friends. But while you're at work, you're going to treat them with respect. And you are going to work with them. They are your team. They are the people that are going to have your back when it comes time to perform a save, or you need help, or you're trying to figure something out. So we have to work together. Number one, I will always show my teammates respect. Sorry, number one. It should be number one again. It's number two. I will always show my teammates respect. Again, it kind of goes back to number one, and they are separate. They are different because number one is very specifically talking about the fact that we all have bad days. We all go through cruddy things that happen at home or they happen at school. And so when you come to work, you need to let that stuff go, and you need to be respectful to your teammates, even if you're upset about other things. And at the same time, showing respect to your teammates, that if you can see they're in a bad mood, don't push them. Don't be a jerk. Just be respectful so that you guys can move forward with it. So number three, this is really important and has made a huge difference. I will not discuss another teammate's personal or professional business with others. We have some very strict rules in our department, specifically because of the fact that we work with teenagers. And so this basically means that if they hear something or someone tells them something, it's to die with them. That is what we always say. It dies with you. You should not be the perpetrator of rumors. We play the game telephone it in service on purpose. So someone that is consistently at the base of a rumor is going to get a write-up. Someone who is at a base of a rumor multiple times, I said consistently, but if they are caught in rumors that are a problem, they're going to get written up, and potentially they will be terminated, depending on the severity of what happens the following times. Now, the first time is just going to be a conversation because, again, these are teenagers, right? So this is super important. It's the same thing with business. If you know that someone did something not great at work, it dies with you because it perpetuates, number one, they're teenagers. It perpetuates really bad ideas. Number two, is that that person, it's hard for that person to come back, and they may like redeem themselves and be promoted into a position that is of quote unquote authority, and it's going to be harder for them to get respect. So everything needs to stay where it is, and the rumor dies with you. Number 4 is I understand negativity is toxic, and I will help to remove this toxicity by maintaining a positive attitude. Now, that does not mean that we're walking around like Snow White, like whistling at birds. It just means that when we're at work, we're appreciative, we're grateful. We're not working a hot fry kitchen. We're not, pushing carts at HEB. We're not doing some of these jobs that other, teenagers have to do. We're blessed to hang out with really cool people at a really cool place, making money for shorter shifts, and having a good time, like, while potentially saving lives. So, I mean, it's amazing, and they need to, my expectation is that they maintain that positivity, because things could always be worse, right? So, this is super important. It has changed the culture and dynamic of the majority of our team. I will revert back to this consistently when people are sitting there just constantly being negative, because it's unacceptable, and they've signed the social contract. I know people have bad days. It doesn't mean that you have this huge problem because you have one bad day, but if it's becoming a consistent issue, this is a social contract that they have signed, and we can bring it back. Also, number 5, I will always show respect to patrons. This one is really important, as we know. And the way that I describe it to the team is that I say, look, I'm going to have your back. When patrons are not being kind to you, I'm going to have your back. I'm going to stand up for you, but I need to make sure that I don't have to talk to you too. Like, if a patron is not being kind and not being respectful of the fact that you are the authority figure there, I'm going to handle that situation, but don't make it to where you've been disrespectful to the patron and now you and I have to have a talk, whereas I should have just only had to have your back. Number 6, I'll be professional about my conversations in front of all patrons, lifeguards, and peers. You'll notice with this particular one, if you go to number 8, it also says, I will not discuss my personal business with lifeguards. This is because I had someone in a more authoritative position that was sharing things that did not need to be shared. And so I felt like this needed to be reiterated in 2 different ways, hoping that one of them would click. So the point is, this number 6 is specifically for all staff, basically saying that I'm very upfront, and I tell them very clearly that they are not allowed to talk about sex, drugs, or alcohol at work. I'm very clear that their parties and their whatever are supposed to stay outside of the job. Not only is it not professional, but we also have children ranging from their ages of like 15, and we have adults at 22. They're not going to have the same life experiences. They're not going to have the same cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, traditions in their homes. And so these are not things that I need to get phone calls from parents saying, hey, why are they discussing this at work? It's unprofessional. We go through sexual harassment. We go through all these fun things. And so I make it very clear to them that they are not allowed to discuss those things, and they are not allowed to say their ridiculousness. That's not professional. And we go over professionalism in front of patrons. So I'm not even talking about the sex, drugs, and alcohol stuff. I'm talking about the other stuff that they come up with. And they come up with so many cool and horrifying things, right? So number 7, I will not use a condescending voice when talking to or about other employees. I've watched this, and I was actually someone who used to do this, and occasionally I'll still catch myself doing it because someone just really ticks me off, right? But it's not often, because I made this rule. So I can't do it if I'm telling them if they can't do it. So I had someone who used to work for me who every time that they would talk about someone that they didn't care for, they would sit there and they would mock them. They would use a voice that was mocking or condescending, right? So if they were talking about them, they'd be like, oh my God, and I said, and she said, like, it's very immature. But I wanted to put this in there because basically, like, I've told my team, like, if someone's being rude to you and you come up to me and say, Susie's being rude to me, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're such a jerk, and I don't ever want to see you again. Your face sucks. I'm going to sit there and be like, well, if you talk like that, I can see why she thinks your face sucks. Because you're being condescending and rude. And the way you're bringing this to me kind of indicates to me how you were possibly talking to them and have been talking to them. So we're going to explore that conversation. And yeah, maybe I talked to Susie once you and I have had a conversation too. So that one's really important to me. I've already discussed number 8. Number 8, I will not discuss my personal business with lifeguards. That is for our head guards and our head swim instructors specifically, because they are almost always adults, and anything that they're going through in their life, these are 15-year-old kids. It is not to be discussed at work. And also there has to be that level, right? For the head guards, even though they're not supervisors in our organization, I am the only supervisor, but they are leaders and they're not peers anymore. And when you sit there and you constantly are sharing your own personal life, yes, you should share some of yourself, but you can't share everything about yourself, because then you're just a peer. You're no longer someone that they look at as a leader. You're just one of the guys, or one of the, guys as in the team. So that part's been, I think, really important in trying to build back professionalism between the head guards and the lifeguards. Number 9, this one's really important, obviously, to me. And that is, I will respect my supervisor's choice. If I disagree, I will discuss this later in private. This comes down to me, the head swim instructor, and the head guards, even sometimes the shift leads, right? So we have, in our organization, we have lifeguards, shift leads, head guards. Parallel to that, we have head swim instructor, and then above all of that, we have myself, and then of course I have my boss, and then she has her boss. But that's our organization. And so it's the same thing for me. I would never sit there and talk to my boss and be like, that's stupid. Like, that's not right. Like, no. That's going to be a conversation I have in private. And it's the same thing. If they disagree or they have continuous questions, even if they think I'm wrong, they are to talk to me about it in private. And I'm very good, and I expect the same from my head guards, my HSI, my head swim instructor, that if we're wrong, we'll have that conversation, we'll think about it, and or we'll get an answer, and we'll apologize because we were wrong. And that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. It's just not okay to not accept it, not apologize for it. But it's also not okay to disrespect your supervisor and make others feel like that person is no longer, doesn't have the authority. It just takes away respect from other team members, and that's not necessary just because you don't agree with something that was said. If I'm ever sitting there and I was disrespectful, or I was harmful in any way, or harassing or bullying, that's a whole different story. I need to be called out, but that's not the situation where this rule came from. So just keep that in mind. And then number 10 is my favorite. I will not hold a grudge. Once the situation is resolved, I will let it go. This is where we talk about relationships within our team. Now, not romantic relationships. That's something that's kind of number 11. That's not really on the list. But for number 10, I sit there and I'm like, I want you guys to build relationships. You don't have to be best friends, but you need to get to know each other. I'm sure you have something in common that you can talk about, some kind of sports, or your parents are ticking you off, or how bad your supervisor drives you crazy, whatever it is. But build relationships, because I asked them in this exercise, I asked them, hey, how many of you have a best friend? 99% of the time, everyone raises their hand. I do have some loners that apparently don't. And that's their prerogative. They enjoy their own company, and they're pretty cool people. So I get why they'd like that. But I will say, hey, who has a best friend? Raise your hand. And they raise their hand. I'm like, who here has acquaintances? And so they raise their hands. And I'm like, okay, when you get into a fight with your best friend, how long does it take for you to resolve that problem? And they're like, not long at all. And then I say, okay, well, with these acquaintances and you get into a fight, how long does it take to resolve these problems? And they're like, yeah, longer. Now, of course, I have my people that are like peacemakers. So they're like, I get along with everyone, which is great. We love them for it. But the most part, people get it. And I'm like, exactly. When you build relationships with people, it's easier to deal with conflict. So I want you to build these relationships. You don't have to, again, you don't have to be best friends. You don't have to know, I mean, just share some stuff about yourself. It doesn't have to be, I always joke, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be, I was born on a cold night in December and my mother said, like, it just needs to be, hey, you play soccer? I play soccer. Or, whatever it is that day. We have these weirdo projects. I'm sure a lot of you in the aquatics and like team areas, you have like outlets that they think they're doing something crazy, but you know that it's there, and it's a way to like get them to do something crazy without doing something stupid. So we have Joe Jim Bob, I think that's his name, I can never get it right, but he's basically like half a mannequin that hasn't been used in forever. We used to use him as a parking cone, and so he's been decorated. He's had dreadlocks. I think recently he had like a military cut. This is all done with duct tape. And so we let them do, all of this weird, crazy stuff. And it's funny because like he's been decorated and all these things are happening, and, they don't know that it's because I'm trying to keep them from doing something that's actually a problem. But the point is that it brings them all together. And so they have these things and they like, oh, did you see Jim Joe Bob? Like, I'll have to post a picture of Jim Joe Bob at some point. But you'll see it, and you'll see the camaraderie that comes around with it. And they've started weirdo surveys like, hey, these are my bicep measurements. Or, hey, this is when the world's going to get shut down again. Or what are we going to name the frog in the drain? It just exercises like that they come up with themselves. But it's not because I've asked them to. It's because I've asked them to create relationships, and it's worked. I do talk about dating. In my organization, you can date people within the organization, although we all know it's very, very rarely a good idea. You can date people in your organization as long as you do not nobody in the relationships makes decisions about the other person's position, right? So you can't be anybody's supervisor or supervisor of a supervisor. And so, but it is frowned upon because it doesn't always go well. And so I asked them, and it's the only time I cuss, okay? Because I feel like there's like emphasis when you use it just occasionally, right? So it's the only time that I ever say a bad word in orientation when we're doing this. And I sit there and say, how many of you have seen high school relationships? And they all raise their hand. I'm like, how many of you have seen them last forever and ever and ever? Again, just like the people that say they don't have a best friend, occasionally like 1% will raise their hand and their parents have been married for 20,000 years, right? I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that's great. And then I say, how many of you have seen it go up in a shit ball of fire? And all of them raise their hand. And I'm like, exactly. I cannot stop you from dating, but if you create drama on our team, that's a whole different story. So if you choose to date, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know about it. I don't need to know it existed, because nothing happened on our team that would make me realize that it existed. I always find out, but they don't cause, if it's happened, they know that it cannot cause a problem on the team, or that's going to be that's potential for their job to be terminated, because not because they dated someone, but because they're bringing that conflict into work. And we don't have time for that. We have a family atmosphere. We're happy. You don't date your family. It just goes badly. And I think it's illegal in most states, but that's not the same thing. So anyways, this is like my less almost-ish 20-minute version, as I thought it would be, of how we go over this, because there is more detail to it. But it has changed our department tremendously, setting these expectations every single April when we have our giant orientation. And then we have additional orientations as we hire new staff, and they have to sign this and they have to understand it too. I go over this with every single team member so that they can't look at me confused when I say number 6, number 4, number 2, because those are the things that'll destroy a team. So I hope this was helpful. If you didn't get to see the document, I think I described it pretty well, but this is our social contract for aquatics. And I love this document. So anyways, I'm going to probably make some more of these videos on my feeling circles and my weirdo-ness that's really helped our team to develop. And then I'd love to hear back from you on if you think that this would be, if you think that this contract will be helpful. And I can always email you a copy of it. So anyways, thank you guys for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on what has worked and what has gone up in a shitball of fire. Have a great day.